Extraordinarily, it has been 30 years since a steel tycoon, a legendary manager, and a ruthless strike partnership defied English football's hierarchy. In 1995, one of the most bizarre stories, in hindsight, occurred in the Premier League. And no, it isn't about how there used to be 22 Premier League teams in the league, and 4 teams would be relegated, but instead, a new winner was crowned champions of England. Led by Kenny Dalglish and bankrolled by the late Jake Walker's dream, the club in question built a team to believe in. Alan Shearer and Chris Sutton were scoring for fun. Tim Shearer captained the disciplined midfield. And with the additions of Lasso, Ripley and Flowers, it was a squad stacked with grit and quality. Blackburn Rovers, a club many had written off as a relic of the past, stood toe-to-toe with the giants of the Premier League. This wasn't supposed to happen. The league was meant for Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, not Blackburn. And now, 3 decades on, their triumph feels more surreal than ever. A one-season miracle never repeated, and maybe never to be again. At least until 2016, but let's not look into something not even 10 years from now. So, this is the story of how Blackburn Rovers won the Premier League, and why, 30 years later, the memory of them lifting the Premier League seems rather vague. Now, I want you to imagine that you have taken up becoming a jockey. You have dreams, like every other small person around you, of winning the Grand National. However, you notice your competitors on their big horses and the like, but there you are with a Shetland pony. Charming, yes. Determined, perhaps, but realistically, not unless something truly extraordinary happened. And in Blackburn's case, that something came in the form of a man who had his fortune in steel, but whose heart and lower intestine was forged with blue and white halves. Jack Walker wasn't just wealthy, he was Blackburn wealthy. Born and raised in the town, he'd built an industrial empire, sold it for hundreds of millions, and decided he wanted to give something back. But Walker didn't think small. He didn't want to just help the club survive or renovate Ewood Park, or keep them in the top flight. His dream was crystal clear. Blackburn Rovers, champions of England in his lifetime. It was an idea so audacious that most football people would have smiled politely and moved on. But Walker had 2 key ingredients: the money to back up his ambition and conviction to see it through. That combination is dangerous in the best way possible. The first major move was a statement, not on the pitch, but in the dugout. In October 1991, Walker convinced Kenny Dalglish to leave behind his break from management and take over a club that had been absent from the top tier for decades. This was the man who had won league titles as both player and manager at Liverpool, who'd handled pressure on a scale Blackburn could only dream of. In modern terms, it would be like Pep Guardiola suddenly agreeing to manage Luton Town. Dalglish didn't come to make up the numbers. In his first season, he guided Blackburn to promotion via the playoffs, bringing top-flight football back to Ewood Park after 26 years. That in itself was a remarkable turnaround, but Walker and Dalglish were only just getting started. Then came the signings, and not just any signings, statement signings. The most famous, of course, was Alan Shearer in the summer of 1992. Still in his early 20s, Shearer had lit up Euro 92 for England and was already being courted by Manchester United. Blackburn broke the British transfer record to bring him in from Southampton for £3.6 million, a colossal sum at the time, and crucially, Shearer bought into the vision. But Dalglish and Walker didn't stop there. Over the next couple of years, the team was carefully constructed like a championship jigsaw. Tim Flowers arrived in goal, a commanding presence between the sticks. Graham Lasso came in from Chelsea to add attacking thrust from left back. Tim Shearer, the captain, anchored the midfield with bite and composure. Stuart Ripley brought width, David Batty brought steel, and Henning Berg marshalled the defence with calm authority. And then, in the summer of 1994, came the final piece of the attacking puzzle. Chris Sutton, the tall, skillful forward, joined from Norwich City for a then English record fee of £5 million. Together with Shearer, they formed the SAS, a strike partnership so effective it sounded like it belonged in an action film. What made this so remarkable was the speed of the transformation. In just a few short years, Blackburn had gone from being a decent second division side to genuine Premier League contenders. Money had certainly played a role, but this wasn't the scattergun spending we'd see from some clubs in later years. Dalglish and his staff built a balanced squad, flair mixed with grit, youth blended with experience. And then there was the town itself. Blackburn isn't London or Manchester or Liverpool. It's not a city dripping with glamour or stuffed with international tourists. It's a working-class Lancashire town with a deep footballing heritage. When Walker started pouring his millions into the team, it felt to the people of Blackburn like a fairy tale unfolding right in front of them. Ewood Park was redeveloped into a modern ground, the stands filling each week with supporters who could barely believe the names they were watching in blue and white. Of course, success didn't come overnight. Blackburn's first season back in the top flight ended with a respectable 4th place finish, followed by second in 1993-94, where they pushed Manchester United for much of the campaign before falling away late on. But each season was a step closer, a tightening of the screws. The rest of the league began to notice. This wasn't just a rich man's hobby. This was a team being built to win. And underpinning it all was Dalglish's steady hand. When Sir Alex Ferguson would jab and jibe in the press, Dalglish stayed largely quiet, shielding his players from the noise. The dressing room wasn't filled with egos or galacticos. It was filled with men who knew their roles, trusted each other, and bought into the idea that they could take on the giants and win. By the summer of 1994, everything was in place. A wealthy owner with a dream, a prudent manager with a plan, a squad laced with talent, from the imperious Shearer to the industrious Shearwood, and a town ready to erupt at the possibility of history. The Premier League, though, is a ruthless proving ground. Money and talent might get you into the race, but to actually cross the line first takes something more. The season ahead would test Blackburn in ways they had never experienced before. Every win would matter, every setback would sting, and looming over it all was the same club that had denied them the year before, Manchester United. Blackburn Rovers were about to find out just how close you can get to football perfection, and whether dreams, even the wildest ones, really can come true. Football seasons are funny things. They don't unravel neatly like a novel. They're messy, unpredictable, and at times downright unfair. For Blackburn Rovers in 1994-95, the title race was less like a steady climb to the top of the mountain and more like a roller coaster that never seemed to stop rattling. The SAS were the stars of the show. Alan Shearer and Chris Sutton didn't just score goals, they set the tone. Chris Sutton was only 21, but played with the maturity of a veteran. Shearer, meanwhile, was already a machine. Together, they ended the campaign with 49 league goals, which sounds more like a team total than two blokes up front. Every week, you can almost guarantee one of them would hit the net. But the beauty of Blackburn's run wasn't only in the goals, it was the way the season turned into a string of make-or-break moments. There was the 1-0 win against QPR in April, where Sutton's strike kept them on course. There was the narrow 1-0 win against Newcastle. Shearer scoring the only goal in the match that felt like it had the tension of a cup final. Those nights mattered as much as any thrashing, because in a title race, the ugly 1-0s count double. And yet, Blackburn had their wobbles. A slip at Southampton, a stumble at Coventry. Matches that on paper should have been routine, but suddenly looked like potholes in the road. If you ask any Blackburn fan, those games were the ones that aged them 10 years. It wasn't just about beating the big boys, it was about surviving the banana skins. Hovering over everything, like a shadow you couldn't shake off, was Manchester United. Ferguson's team were relentless, as always. One week they'd scrape a win with a Cantona penalty. The next Giggs would tear down the ring and rip someone apart. Every time Blackburn thought they'd carved out a gap, United clawed it back. It wasn't just football, it was psychological warfare. The clash at Old Trafford summed it up. Everyone billed it as a title decider. In reality, it was just another reminder that Ferguson's men weren't going anywhere. Cantona scored, United won 1-0, and Blackburn walked off feeling like they'd been punched in the stomach. Yet, instead of folding, they regrouped. That resilience, the ability to take a hit and keep swinging, kept them alive. By the time April arrived, the season had turned into a two-horse race in the truest sense. Every Saturday, the country tuned in not just to see who won, but who blinked first. Newspapers ran league titles side by side, fans had radios glued to their ears, and managers started looking over their shoulders. Blackburn's home form was their safety net. Ewood Park became the place where dreams stayed intact. Sutton's flicks, Shearer's volleys, Ripley's lung-busting runs. The crowd lived off them. It wasn't always pretty, but it was effective. The roar when Shearer smashed one in from 25 years wasn't just celebration, it was relief. Still, nothing about this title race was straightforward. United smelled blood, cutting the gap, the tension ratcheting up to unbearable levels. For Blackburn, every point drop felt like the dream slipping away grain by grain. And that's the thing about a season like this. It wasn't just about goals and tactics. It was about nerves, about holding your breath for 90 minutes, about the unbearable weight of expectation. The players felt it, the fans felt it, even Dalglish felt it, though he hid it behind his trademark calm. By early May, it was clear this was going to the final day. 37 games played, 1 to go, and still nothing settled. Blackburn, the small town club with the still magnate's dream, was standing on the brink of the unthinkable. Manchester United, the reigning champions, were right there breathing down their necks. The entire season, every Sutton header, every Shearer screamer, every Flowers save, every nervy 1-0 had led to this, one last Sunday that would decide everything. The final days of a top-flight season rarely feel normal. On Sunday, the 14th of May 1995, it was anything but. Blackburn Rovers travelled to Anfield, while Manchester United were away at Upton Park to play West Ham. The two matches together would decide the title. Going into that last day, Blackburn held a 2-point lead over Manchester United, meaning United needed a win at West Ham to have any chance of overtaking them, considering they had the superior goal difference. If Blackburn matched or bettered United's result, they would be champions. Kenny Dalglish, who had previously been a hugely successful Liverpool player and manager before joining Blackburn, was therefore managing at his old stomping ground on a day full of awkward history and theatre. At Anfield, Alan Shearer put Blackburn in front. John Barnes levelled for Liverpool, and Jamie Redknapp struck deep in stoppage time to make it 2-1 to Liverpool. Alan Shearer finished the league season as the competition's top scorer, with 34 goals. Meanwhile at Upton Park, West Ham took the lead through Michael Hughes, and Manchester United were pegged back by a Brian McClair equaliser. Ludek Miklosko's performance for West Ham is widely singled out in contemporary and club write-ups as instrumental in denying United victory. That game finished 1-1.
Feel sure they're champions. They are. What a season and what a finish to it. Blackburn Rovers are the champions.
So, when the final whistle went at Upton Park, it was confirmed that Manchester United could not find the winner they needed, despite Blackburn's defeat at Anfield. The draw at West Ham meant Blackburn won the Premier League. Official records show Blackburn finished the season on 89 points to Manchester United's 88. Blackburn lifted a Premier League trophy on that day. Players and journalists who were there recalled the surreal mix of emotions in the away end and the way news trickled round the stadiums. Fans with their radios, updates from one ground affecting the mood in the other. What followed was celebration, and later, the beginning of a different chapter for the club. And there we have it, the story of Blackburn Rovers' Premier League title win. A tale that began with one man's dream and the investment to back it, flourished through the goals of Shearer and Sutton, and reached its nail-biting climax of that unforgettable afternoon in May 1995. In our first chapter, we saw how Jack Walker's vision transformed his hometown club from second-tier mediocrity into genuine top-level contenders. Money opened the door, yes, but it was Kenny Dalglish's steady hand and clever recruitment that built a team capable of more than just making up the numbers. This wasn't simply a rich man's plaything, it was a club put together with purpose. Then came the SAS, Shearer and Sutton, tearing through defences in 1994-95. They weren't just scoring goals, they were dictating the story of the season. Week after week, their partnership carried Blackburn higher, until they found themselves staring at the possibility of history. And finally the crescendo, the final day, when the Premier League title was decided not in one stadium, but in two, Anfield and Upton Park, linked by tension, radios, and a nation glued to the unfolding drama. It ended in defeat for Blackburn on that day, but triumphed in the bigger picture. 89 points, one more than Manchester United, and the club's first league title since 1914. What makes it so extraordinary is what it represents. Blackburn's title was proof that English football still had space for ambition to upset tradition. Yes, Jack Walker's money mattered, but without Dalglish's management, the SAS's goals, and the collective will of the squad, it would have meant nothing. Blackburn showed that a club outside the established giants could rise, compete, and win. And this is why I chose to make a video on this topic. You rarely, or don't at all, hear about this amazing underdog story. Yes, Leicester was nearly a decade ago, but this season holds as much merit to the primary purpose of a competitive league in sport as anything else. What was once vague to me is now more clear as to how Blackburn achieved the impossible, moving the immovable object. Metaphorically, not literally. Of course, the story didn't last. Dalglish soon stepped away, Shearer left for Newcastle, and within 4 years, Blackburn were relegated. Today, their triumph feels almost like a footballing fable, a reminder of what once was and what could still be possible. And yet it wasn't the last miracle. 2 decades later, Leicester City picked up that same torch, and against even longer odds, shocked the world in 2015-16. Different circumstances, same heartbeat, the idea that in football, sometimes the impossible happens. 30 years on, Blackburn's title still sparkles. The roar at Anfield when the news came through from Upton Park. Jack Walker's tears of joy. A small town club crowned kings of England. Blackburn's story is one of ambition, teamwork, and timing. And a reminder that even in a sport dominated by money and power, dreams can come true.